All right, hello everybody. So today I'm joined by my good friend Angelica Oung. She's from Taiwan and she is a pro-nuclear activist, but she works for the Anthropocene Institute. So those people are very gracious. They help me too. So please, Angelica, you have just been to COP. What is it? COP 30, COP 29.
COP 29 in Baku, Azerbaijan.
Yes, and tell us about it. We are especially interested in hearing, how well it went for nuclear, but there's probably also a lot of other stuff that you can talk about.
Oh boy, how to get started? Well, first of all, I feel like um, everybody was looking at this as kind of a placeholder COP, even before it got started. I don't know if you notice a kind of pattern with COPs. There seems to be a big COP and then a little COP and a big
Yeah,
COP and a little COP.
the boom
Like
bust.
Glasgow was a big COP, and then Sharm el Sheikh was little. And then Dubai was huge last year. And this year in Azerbaijan, for various reasons, it was a little bit muted. It was a much, much smaller event. By the way, I thought Azerbaijan actually did a great job logistically in terms of hosting it.
Hmm.
You didn't have any of the logistic problems you heard about in the Egypt one. And everything ran really smoothly. I personally thought it was a good COP for nuclear. I was there in kind of a dual roles. I was there as a pro nuclear activist for sure, but I was also there just to be an observer in the negotiations. This was something I had the ability to do for the first time because last year in Dubai was when I went to COP for the first time. I mostly had a green zone path. And that's like the more carnival, World's Fair side of COP. Um, but the heart of the meetings, always the negotiations that goes on between the parties from all these countries all around the world, right? So for better or for worse, this is a mechanism that we as a world have decided is how we're going to take on the problem of climate change. And I wanted to see how the sausage got made.
Mm.
So I mostly split my time between those two activities and also attended the side events, most importantly related to nuclear, um, and some socializing. And all in all, I would say if I had to sum it up, it's a frustrating experience for everyone in terms of the negotiation side. I don't think anybody was happy with a deal that got made, but a deal was made. And I think that might be important because we are in a world of uncertainty and banking any progress, even if it's unsatisfying for the time being,
Hmm.
could turn out to be quite important going forward.
So if we look at COP, what is being discussed most is basically the carbon problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem of heating the earth and the climate
Yes.
change. But what do they negotiate about? Is it just the ends, or is it also about the means?
Well, it's interesting that you should say that. I think this year's COP is very much focused on the money, actually, on the financing. This is supposed to be the climate financing COP. Because last year in Dubai, they did set up a bunch of goals. And um, of course, we know that we're supposedly committed to the goal of um, holding the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. This is a very, very ambitious goal. And too ambitious to the point that some people think it's frankly unrealistic.
Hmm.
But when you do the math of what is the size of the investment that we have to put into this climate change business in order to hold the Earth temperature growth to underneath 1.5 degrees C, Um, I don't know how they did the math. Eventually, the number that got floated around is 1.3 trillion. That's trillion with a T.
Mm-hmm.
Um, dollars a year.
Right.
So
And that's worldwide.
yes, worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that was obviously right out of the gate a very, very audacious idea. So let me rewind a little bit back to the Copenhagen COP. I believe it was
Mm-hmm.
COP 15. That was when they had the first climate financing goal, and it was a commitment um, to have a 100 billion a year budget to go towards climate financing. So that was the goal they had in Copenhagen, was to reach 100 billion a year by the year 2020. It was in fact achieved in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had that for a couple of years now, and now we want to blow it up to an amount that's more than 10 times that much.
And by when should that be achieved?
Well, we didn't end up with an answer.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't end up with an answer. So let's go back a little bit, because the $1.3 trillion figure is so huge, and there's a lot of argument on who needs to contribute to it and what kind of funds need to contribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest bone of contention you need to be aware of in COP is that the low-income countries, they're called least developed countries in COP speak, and the developed countries are not exactly on the same team. Of course, we're all on the same team. We're all on Team Earth.
Yeah.
But from the view of the least developed countries, they are bearing the brunt of climate change, while they didn't contribute historically to all this carbon that's already in the air, right? So they think that for climate financing, it should be the developed countries paying, and they need to pay out of their own pockets. So they want to basically saying, yeah, you need to fix this, and you don't just need to pay to decrease the amount of carbon in the air. You need to pay directly for measures to help us survive the amount of climate change that's already inevitable.
Is there also some idea of reparations in there, that there's already suffering?
Probably, yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think they ended up talking much about loss and damages, but that would be where that goes. So anyhow,
here's one question. Sorry to interrupt. Are they also talking about using these funds for mitigation and adaptation?
I think that's also a part of it. And the funds, it's called, oh gosh, the new quantified collective goals. New collective quantified goals, NCQGs. And the NCQGs were settled at the end for 300 billion a year. So obviously that is far, far less than the 1.3 billion a year that is the goal.
Trillion.
Yes, trillion, sorry.
It's mind-boggling.
It's a big difference.
1,000.
Much smaller. But at the same time, it's 3 times the current 100 billion a year contribution. So I don't know. We have a set goal of we have any way of knowing how this is going to go. And in a way, we're kind of making it up as we go along, because we don't know what things are going to be like next year. Donald Trump is going to be the president. So there could be a chance. In fact, I would say it's almost fairly certain that he will take the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement again, and then we'll have another period of discombobulation.
I mean, it's funny that you broached the subject because the United States has just pledged to triple their nuclear capacity. They now have put a real figure on it, right? They said, okay, now it's going to be 200 gigawatts that we need to build. I mean, do you think that there's maybe a risk that the Trump administration will say, well, this was a promise made at COP and we're not going to abide by it, or?
I think the U.S. Nuclear industry have to be very careful about playing a good amount of defense, and we have the opportunity to play some offense too with Trump.
Mm.
There are some opportunities. He is not an anti-nuclear guy; he's very pro-nuclear. But I think it's absolutely possible that the U.S. pipeline that's just been very tenuously opened up is in jeopardy because all the mechanisms for getting those new plants, especially the build out of the big possible gigawatt scale reactors, that's through a mechanism called the Loan Program Office, and that basically parcels out money from the the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed under Biden.
Mm.
And Trump is on the record for, of course, not being a fan of the IRA, which, in addition to nuclear, also has a lot of tax incentives for other wind and solar stuff that he likes less. So there's an absolute danger that Trump would go after the LPO in a really irrevocable way, and that would damage the business case for the kind of big beautiful reactor builds that we could have looked forward to as a part of the plan to triple nuclear by 2050. So a lot is in play. I don't want to be too pessimistic though, because what we have is in the US is we have two major parties who are both very pro-nuclear. So we're moving from, Trump. The first Trump administration was the most pro-nuclear administration of my lifetime until the Biden administration.
Right.
It was even better. And so now Trump is back again. I don't think he will be bad. Of course, I want him to continue to hold on to Biden's, whatever Biden's achieved. And then maybe, who knows, maybe
double
he'll
down. Yeah, double down on it.
I think,
I'm going to do it even better than
exactly.
Biden. I am better for the nuclear industry.
If he can be convinced that to do, it would be to his shame for any nuclear power plant project that would have come to fruition under Biden to die on his watch, maybe it would encourage him to let those projects through. But I don't know. I will know more, by the way, just to put a pin in it. I will be going to DC next week. The Department of Energy's Deploy Conference is on the 4th and the 5th of December in DC. So those are the Loan Program Office people talking to industry, not just advanced nuclear, but all sorts of industry. I'm sure there's a lot of people asking a lot of questions at that conference. Of course, the folks that are likely to be able to give the definitive answer to those questions are probably at Mar-a-Lago, but that is the nature of the beast. It is what it is, but I will be a little closer to the action, and maybe I'll come back then and tell you what I know.
Yeah, let's get back to COP because that's basically what we should be talking about. I know that
Absolutely.
the United States plays a big role in what can and cannot be done. What about China and India? Did you hear anything about them? What were their pledges or plans at COP?
Well, India had a very controversial role to play in this year's COP negotiations. Not so much China. I didn't hear China speak up that much, although they are also, let's just say their role was discussed, right? Because in the old 100 billion pledge that was agreed upon at Copenhagen, basically that was just developed countries chipping in because they're the one that historically emitted. And everybody else got a free pass. I don't want to say free pass because, of course, they haven't admitted. Why should they pay? But time has passed. And I don't know if you noticed, but China's cumulative carbon emission just surpassed that of the EU.
Mm,
And it's going to keep shooting up from there. So, and while China, when you look at GDP per capita, it's still not terribly high. It's not a poor country anymore. In fact, it is exceedingly powerful economy. And so people are starting to ask questions like, does it still make sense to have a certain basket of countries designated as developed countries and only have them contribute? Because it's kind of weird that China isn't contributing.
right, right. I mean, I've been sorry to interrupt. I've been mapping China, the energy infrastructure of China for the past month now. And it's really disturbing to see that they're building coal plants every 20 kilometers. Whenever you see a piece of shore or a large river, there's new coal-fired power plant construction projects
Yeah,
everywhere.
basically, when you look at coal power growth in the world, it's China and India. I think those are the big ones, but
Mm, mm.
those two are enough. They're just set to burn so much coal. Of course, I have to also add they build a lot of renewables. They build a they do a great job with nuclear.
Mm.
And my hope is that with those new coal plants, they are to have on hand as capacity, and that they will be operated less and less often as they increase their renewables and nuclear clean energy supply.
And
So
at some point, you might even convert them to become a nuclear power plant. It's hard, but both the U.S. and China are looking into it.
I don't know, but to bring things back to COP, to
Yeah,
bring things
sorry.
back to COP, China is definitely a point of discussion. In terms of India, I would say they've been very vociferous in speaking on behalf of the lesser developed countries. And they've actually described the conclusion, the final version that was passed. They described it basically as a stitch up. They described it as a travesty. And they were very, very, very angry with the results. They don't think that the developed countries have contributed enough at all. And they don't think it's fair that non-developed countries are starting to be asked to contribute. And they find it very suspicious that private money is being counted as part of the contribution. Because to them, if it's like a loan or if it's like an investment or something like that, it's not a grant. Um, they just see it as more burden being put on the developing nations. It's not a clean source of funds.
Right, right.
So that's pretty much their point of view. Um, I morally, I can see why they would feel that way, but I actually think this is a very unhelpful way of negotiating in the world right now because we all have to be able to read the mood of the room. And right now, it includes reading the mood of the electorate of those developing countries. And I believe that on the whole, they tend to be trending more right wing, trending more cynical towards international processes, exactly like COP.
Mm.
And to me, it's going to be very, very difficult and unlikely to just get them to, in fact, fund the 300 billion a year with anything approaching integrity, without having their electorates rise up with pitchforks and take everybody down.
Do you see
So
something happening like a breakdown? I mean, if the United States pulls back from Paris, I mean, chances are at some point that India and China basically pull their hands off
I
the
actually
deal as
don't think
well.
so. I
No?
actually think this is my personal theory,
Mm.
and I don't have any direct. I actually didn't hear the Chinese delegate say anything in the negotiation I've observed. Um, but my theory is that China is waiting in the wings to play a greater role in the COP process if the United States pull out again. And it's going to be a diplomatically astute move because it's going to be able to position itself as the true global leader,
Mm.
the grown up in the room, the steady hand on the rudder, whereas the United States is petulant, unreliable, throws its weight around, um, not holding accountability. So I think they would like to do that, just like in the Middle East process, how they've tried to play the peacekeeper with some success.
Mm.
I think on the climate process, China isn't going to jettison climate. I don't think there are climate deniers in to the same degree in China. They see it as a more pragmatic issue. Without climate deniers, you do get more of a sense that, yes, this is a problem we need to take care of. Therefore, it makes sense to have an international process for it. And by the way, it will be advantageous for our country to play a key role in it and gain international leadership and prestige that way.
Right, right. So, I mean, now we've taken a look at the macro side. Let's take a look on on the energy side of things. So what were the energy policies or the promises that were talked about at Baku at COP?
I think I need to give you a bit of the overview of
Mm-hmm.
um, so at the negotiations, there are multiple tracks going on all at once, and if you try to follow all the tracks, you'll go crazy. You can never do it. So what I did was I followed pretty much only the stuff on the NCQG. That's the climate financing one. So we pretty much it was a lot of argument about the top line numbers, and a lot of it was um, least developed countries bickering about the inequities and the most developed countries talking about how everybody has to pitch in. So that was a track that I followed. But I can tell you from the conclusion of last year's COP that in terms of what to do about it, it's very much like nothing's really changed. Last year was historic in that nuclear language, including nuclear, was finally in the mix. And this year, we see kind of like a continuation of that. We see more events with nuclear going on in the side events. We see 6 more countries join the triple nuclear pledge. I believe those are Turkey,
You
El
go.
Salvador,
Yeah.
Kenya, Kosovo. Oh gosh, 2 more. Which 2? We'll look those up later. But anyhow, so 6 more countries joined the pledge to triple nuclear. That's fantastic. But I think if you look at the overall landscape of where the money is going, you got to still think that, oh wow, it is still a very renewables driven process,
Hmm.
right? That's
Hmm.
because a lot more countries, 100 or however many countries, had the goal of wanting to triple renewables by a
Right.
more ambitious date, right? So
For a lot of these countries, in fairness, a lot of these countries don't have the the amount of industrialization and high energy usage that most of the countries that tripled their nuclear plants have. So for them, it is easier
yeah,
easier to go the renewable way because they don't have as high as high demand, base
yeah.
load demand as those
if
other
if
countries.
you're if you're a country like Namibia, you have a population of 3 million,
Mm,
and a lot of sun. Frankly, yeah, solar sounds like a really, really good way to go when it comes to decarbonizing your energy mix. Although, interestingly enough, I picked this up from COP. The Namibians are in an interesting predicament because they just discovered a lot of oil and gas.
oh no.
And well, you know what? Let the Namibians sell the oil and gas.
Sure,
And I'm being
sure.
serious. We're going to be using oil and gas for quite a while. And why should it be always Saudi Arabia and Norway profiting and not the Namibians?
Of course. There's this ironic thing that I learned about Namibia, and that's a couple of years ago at COP. I believe it was still when the Belgian minister who was killing the Belgian
Uh,
nuclear plants, Tinne van der Straten, she went to the COP and she made a deal with the Namibians to have them build a lot of solar power plants, solar fields basically, and then use all that electricity to create hydrogen and then transport all that hydrogen from Namibia to Belgium. And the Netherlands did the same. And I was like, did they do some calculations? Do they know that it takes more energy to get the boat to Europe than just use
I,
it there?
I did not know that they legalized crack smoking in Belgium because I don't know what she was on. But that I all those green hydrogen plants, I feel like are this is not about cops especially, but I
Mm,
feel like there's like an air of realization that's just been sweeping through the people that I know that hydrogen is going to be exceedingly problematic.
mm, mm.
Sweeping.
We have a really damning news article that came out earlier this week about hydrogen plants in the Netherlands, and that basically we have two ministries who are basically putting out competing views, and one of the two ministries is talking to Shell, and they're talking to Shell, and they try to encourage them to build electrolyzers and such, and then the other ministry comes and says you can't do that because of you will get more NOx emissions and such. So basically, two ministries of the same government are basically at odds with each other. And Shell is like, listen, if I build an electrolyzer, I can't sell the hydrogen anyway because it's too expensive.
Yeah, I think
Crazy.
I think the problem with hydrogen is that it's at the quantities that people need it for. It just wouldn't pencil out. The cost just wouldn't pencil out. And plus, it's like this nasty little molecule. I didn't realize this until recently. It's a
Mm.
very nasty little molecule. It wants to corrode things. It
Yeah,
wants to
embrittlement. Yep.
ape. So it's always like, yeah, embrittling the metal, or it's like sneaking out of these like sneaky little gaps
The
and
tiniest hole.
a tiniest hole. It wants to be free. It doesn't like to be liquid. It doesn't like to be transported without,
it's
fairly
it's
extreme conditions.
and it does have a pretty potent effect once it's released into the atmosphere. I don't
as
know
a greenhouse gas.
Yeah, I don't know if it's as a greenhouse gas, but it does stuff chemically in the atmosphere,
Oh, interesting.
which adds to the greenhouse effect. So it's really, I mean, it's not nice. Plus, and this is the whole thing. There's no demand for it. You know, the
Yeah.
only demand that's there is what we use. We use hydrogen basically we can use it for steel making, which is being done in Sweden, and we do use hydrogen for nitrogen products, right? Like fertilizer, ammonia. Uh, but the trouble is, we get it cheaper from basically steam reforming natural gas.
The
That's the
other
problem.
SMR, right? Yeah, no, it's might be a dead end there, but I don't know. After emerging from the COP, just to return to that, it did kind of cross my mind that for nuclear to really go on its way, it's good to be aligned with processes like COP and decarbonization and all that. But at a side event, the International Energy Agency is a chairman or director general, I forgot, Fateh Birol said something very interesting. He's like, yes, nuclear energy is low carbon. That's important. That's not the reason why all these countries are going back to nuclear energy. The reason they're doing it is because of energy security.
Yes,
And
that's
I think that's so important for
that,
those of us working in nuclear to keep in mind, which
that's
is
it.
that it's good to it's good to have the decarbonization message. It's good to be aware of all the benefits and to allow nuclear to get credit for being low carbon, but ultimately decarbonization is not the thing that is
Mm.
going to help us build new nuclear power plants.
It's reliability,
Energy security is, and that's why
dependability.
I think this whole new generation of nuclear power projects, more than anything, I would like to see them be on time,
Mm.
because uh, it's one thing to go over budget. That's bad. Of course, it's bad to go over budget,
No,
but going
speed is more
over
important.
budget is going over speed. Going over time is worse
Yeah.
if your reason for building something is energy security.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it that way, it always struck me as kind of a mystery why people would pursue a technology like wind and solar, where it comes burdened with this compounding problem. And the compounding is that you need to stack technology on technology on technology on
Mm-hmm.
technology in order to make sure that you get this dependable energy system that everybody wants to rely on. And then they in the discussion, what they do is they basically ignore that whole issue, and they say, listen, look at the levelized cost of wind and look at the levelized cost of solar, and nuclear will never be able to compete with that. And it seems that it has finally dawned on a lot of important people that that's just not the decisive metric to take into consideration. It's exactly as you say. It seems to have dawned on all these people who are in these positions at COP and in positions in governments that dependability should be one of the more decisive factors.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it's that they all of a sudden got smart about levelized cost of energy. I would love to think that, but honestly, I don't think it is. I think what it is the war in Ukraine happened, right? And then
Mm.
people in Europe got a big wake up call about how cold it would be without Russian
Oh
gas.
yeah.
And that was a wake up call that got everybody thinking about energy security. And that's when people remembered, oh, yeah, nuclear power works. And we've always known this some deep down somewhere, but you
It's
couldn't protect
crazy,
people.
isn't it? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Last week or the week before, we had a 2 week doldrum, in Germany. You know what a doldrum is, right?
Yes, the Dunkelflaute,
A
right?
Dunkelflaute, exactly. And what happened during these first hours of this Dunkelflaute, the electricity price spiked up to 800 euros per megawatt hour.
Amazing.
800. That's like almost 10x, what
Mhm.
consumers are paying. And that's simply, again, it's a compounding issue. Many people don't understand this, but we use gas for cooking, we use gas for heating our houses, we use gas to warm our bath water, but we also use gas for industry, and we use gas to produce electricity. So the demand skyrockets, and obviously the electricity price follows suit. It's that simple. But many people still, I mean, the realization is dawning that we really need something else. The Germans are still, I think that they are going to get a sizable, almost a seismic shift in their political landscape, which I mean, it's it, I'm still not sure whether that will be good or bad, but for energy it might be good because that will finally open some doors to new views in German politics and in German bureaucracy in terms of what to do with energy. So let's conclude with a question. What is your key takeaway? What is your feeling about COP? How do you feel that it went, and what is the trajectory that we're on?
Well, I think it's been a difficult and contentious COP, but I think we got through it with a deal. I think that was better still than no deal. And everybody's very much looking forward to the next COP to actually give us some answers. Um, I think in the meantime, all eyes will be on the US to see how they will set the tone. We'll see if there's more falling apart of the developed nations in terms of their political willingness to take the reins, and whether or not the middle income countries like China might come up to take more of a leadership position. We don't know. These are things to watch. I think this is a COP in which nothing was settled. Having said that, I think for us as pro-nuclear activists, um, it's very, very well to both keep an eye on these things and, of course, be a part of these events. But in a weird way, we're also forging our own way,
Mm,
and we're fighting for our projects. Of course, we want to make sure we get full credit for the fact that they're low carbon, but we also know that they're probably not getting built 100% just to save the planet. So, also focusing on the energy security reasons, national pride reasons, even workforce development reasons, all sorts of other good reasons why it's really a great idea to build nuclear power plants. And by the way, I can add one more reason why it's a great idea to build a nuclear power plant that I learned at COP. This is not the first time I heard this idea being floated, but it is the first time that it came from like a really authoritative source. So I heard this from Dr. Michael Goff of the U.S. Department of Energy, and he mentioned in one of the side events that in fact the U.S. reactors are probably going to go to 100 years of
mm,
operation. So we know they were licensed originally for 40 years, right? And then they got to extend it to 60. We now have a few that are getting extended to 80. And now he's saying it's looking likely that they can go to 100, no problem. So now I think we can all, we're talking about those light water reactors anyhow. We can start speaking of nuclear reactors properly as 100-year assets, century assets, right? Assets you pass on, not to your children only, but to your children's children,
yeah,
even your great grandchildren after that, possibly. And I think that's a really a different way to spin value on its head.
yeah,
Instead of the levelized cost, the 20-year cost, you think about this You build it once, it's like an investment for your country that is effectively in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very powerful message to speak to the voters also, because we have this problem of democracies being too short sighted to build nuclear power plants because you're out of power by the time the project gets going, let alone
Oh
gets.
yeah. But by the time you made your technology decision.
Yeah, so you need something that kind of really pitches this to the voters in a very emotionally resonant way. It's like,
Mm.
this is a century asset that you will pass on to your great great grandchildren.
Yeah.
Then you can generate enough goodwill to actually get it moving.
That's an amazing, amazing final note for this, for this talk between us two. I would really like to, ask everybody to, where can they find you? Where, if they
Well,
want to follow
if
you
you're
on
still
internet?
in, if you're still on X or Twitter, you can find me under my handle Angelica Oung.
I will make sure it is. It is in the link.
It's in the link below.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah.
And if you have flown away to bluer skies, I am also on Blue Sky as Angelica Oung, and on LinkedIn also, of course. And yeah, very glad to. Oh, of course, I can't finish without mentioning my Substack, elementalenergy.substack.com.
Nice, nice. Really, really give it a go, because she really knows what she's talking about and she packages it really well. So, and with that, I would like to thank you, Angelica, for coming on with me. And I would like to thank everybody for watching, and may this strong force be with you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Wow.